tree. What the hell was her story anyways? Andy slapped the steering wheel. A girl alone with a little boy. He had asked her about family, even a boyfriend. No one. How could she have no one? He didn't miss how pale she'd gotten, and he knew there was more to the story. What he knew was that she was alone with a child who couldn't talk. What he didn't know and planned to find out was where she had come from. Jules would know. Come to think of it, he had no idea how long Laura had worked at the estate. It didn't take Andy long to track down Jules in the kitchen with the cook, tasting what looked like some kind of sauce the old cook was stirring on the stove. Both women stared at him when he walked in with an odd look that had Andy glancing behind him to see if there was a problem.
"Jules, I need to speak with you."
He knew he sounded irritated. Jules set the spoon on the smooth green counter. The cook was an older, short, plump woman who was still staring at him, holding the wooden spoon in her wrinkled hand. He couldn't remember if he'd ever spoken to her. He blinked as he tried to think of her name, but nothing would come to him. "Certainly, Mr. Friessen. Would you like to speak with me in the hallway?" She motioned toward the door and even took a step to leave the kitchen.
"No, here's fine."
Andy crossed his arms and didn't miss the way the cook's wrinkled face tightened. She banged a pot with a spoon, making an awful racket, and then yanked open the fridge, pulling out a large pan with a hunk of beef that was marinating, and sat it on the counter with a clatter. Andy frowned, not missing the old woman's irritation as her sharp gaze narrowed, and he was positive she was shooting sparks his way.
"Jules, about Laura, the maid. What can you tell me about her?"
Jules had run this household of servants since Andy was a child. She was a large older woman, and her double chin wobbled when she spoke. "Well, not much. She's young. She always came to work, did her job. I'm not sure what it is you'd like to know about her. She's gone. Your mother fired her." A loud clatter had them both staring at the cook.
"Pa slept,"
the cook snapped, glaring at Andy with bloodshot eyes that were now shooting shards of ice his way. Jules's expression became unusually nervous as she glanced at the ceiling and then back at Andy. "Sir, why don't we step out of the kitchen and maybe in the library where you'd be more comfortable?"
"I want to know who hired Laura, how long she's been working here, where she came from."
He didn't move, but watched the cook this time as he spoke, and she glared right back at him with something that resembled pure venom. For the first time ever, Andy considered taking a step back. Jules cleared her throat roughly. "Sir, I hired her. She's been here since the spring." The old cook snorted, interrupting Jules. "Ada, enough! Stir your sauce!" Jules shouted at the cook, shoving her hands on her plump hips. Andy took a step closer to the cook and stopped when she appeared to squeeze the wooden spoon handle in a way that made him think it'd snap in two. The woman had balls, he had to give her that. The way she didn't back down, firming her trembling lips to a fine white line. He was positive that if he stepped any closer, she'd raise her hand and cosh him over the head.
"Ada, is it?"
Andy didn't wait for her to respond.
"Is there something you want to say?"
"No, sir, she has nothing to say. She has a dinner to prepare, so please, sir, if we could step out." Jules tried to step in and even extended her hand again toward the door, but Andy cut her off before she could finish.
"No, I want to hear what Ada here has to say."
"You're a pig!" She spat the words at him. "Oh, Ada!" Jules groaned behind him. "Sir, she didn't mean a word. Please don't fire her. Your mother has 5 dinner guests arriving this evening, and there is no one to cook dinner if you fire her. Now, Ada, get back to the stove and mind your tongue." Jules clapped her hands. But Andy was still staring at the tiny old woman, who stared at him as if he were the devil himself, with not a lick of fear anywhere in her. What a tough old broad she was.
"Jules, would you shut up? Now, Ada, you're obviously upset with something I've done, so I would like to hear it."
Andy glanced sharply at Jules just as she opened her mouth. He was positive she would make another attempt to get him to leave, but he had no intention of walking out that door or anywhere until he heard what this unusual, spunky woman had to say.
Jules, I want to hear this. Obviously, there is a problem.
The cook stepped closer to Andy and held up the wooden spoon in front of her face.
You, sir, stay away from that girl. She doesn't need the likes of you making things any more difficult for her. And she's a good girl, she is. She caused no trouble, worked hard, was never late. She asks nothing of no one. She didn't deserve to get fired, and I told Jules just that after I got here and heard what you did. If it wasn't for you and your temper carrying on like you were, the tree would still be standing now.
She waved the spatula in front of his face.
And she will not be your plaything. You stay away from her and her child.
Andy stared at this short old lady, whose face was deeply etched with lines. She didn't cower, look away, or apologize. She stood right in front of him, daring him to step closer, to say something stupid. Frankly, he admired this old woman's gumption, standing up to him, not tiptoeing around him as everyone did.
I am not interested in making her my plaything.
The old woman shrieked and cut him off.
Bullshit! Don't think I haven't seen both you and your dad eyeing up that poor girl every time she bent over, knelt down, as if you were imagining all